The darkness of Christmas Eve, 1886, enveloped the Martin family home in the French town of Lisieux. Little Thérèse, almost 14, was silently crying as she climbed the stairs. Her father, Louis, exhausted after midnight mass, had just told one of her sisters that this would be the last year the youngest would receive presents in her shoes, as was the children's custom at the time. Those words, spoken without any malice by a tired father, cut the excessively sensitive girl's heart. She was about to burst into tears and throw one of her well-known tantrums, as she always did when she was contradicted. But, suddenly, something extraordinary and invisible happened at the top of that staircase. Thérèse abruptly wiped away her tears, ran down the steps, and with a radiant and sincere smile, opened her presents as if nothing had happened. On that cold December night, the fragile, neurotic, and tearful girl disappeared forever. There, the spiritual giant the world would know as Saint Thérèse of the child Jesus was born. But how did a young woman who lived only 24 years, who never accomplished great public works, who never founded a religious order, and who spent her last 9 years hidden behind the walls of a cloistered convent, become one of the most beloved and influential saints in the entire history of the Catholic Church? The story of Marie-Françoise-Thérèse Martin begins in Alençon, France, on January 2, 1873. She was the youngest of 9 children, born to Louis Martin and Zélie Biérin, a couple of deep and incredibly strong Catholic faith. What few know is that both Louis and Zélie had attempted religious life before meeting. Louis tried to be a monk at the Great St. Bernard Hospice, the famous monastery in the Swiss Alps, where monks rescued pilgrims lost in the snow with their dogs, but was refused because he didn't know Latin. Zélie, a woman of strong and active temperament, tried to be a nun at the Hôtel Dieu in Alençon, but the prioress did not grant her request. God had other plans for them. They married and formed a family that, more than a century later, would make history. In 2015, Pope Francis canonized Louis and Zélie together, the first time in the Church's history that a couple was canonized in the same ceremony. If you want to learn more about the extraordinary story of this father, who is also a saint, be sure to watch our episode about Saint Louis Martin. Thérèse's childhood, whom her father affectionately called "my little queen," was marked by intense family love, but also by devastating losses that would shape her psyche forever. Of the 9 Martin children, 4 died in infancy, including little Helene, who was only 5 years old. Thérèse herself almost died of enteritis when she was a few months old, needing to be sent to live with a nurse in the countryside for over a year to survive. But the definitive tragedy occurred when Thérèse was only 4.5 years old. Her mother, Zélie, who had become an enormously successful embroiderer, died of painful breast cancer in August 1877. The impact on little Thérèse was profound and traumatic. The cheerful, proud, and expansive girl became shy, withdrawn, and excessively sensitive. Any harsh look made her cry uncontrollably. She herself would later write that the first part of her life ended that day. To try to alleviate the pain and seek the support of his wife's family, Louis sold the embroidery business and moved with his 5 surviving daughters to the town of Lisieux, renting a beautiful country house called Les Buissonnets. There, her eldest sister, Pauline, took on the role of second mother to Thérèse. The girl clung to Pauline desperately, finding in her the emotional anchor she had lost with Zélie's death. But peace in the Martin home would not last long. When Thérèse was 9 years old, in October 1882, Pauline announced that she would enter the Carmel of Lisieux, a strict cloistered convent. For the girl, it was like losing her mother for the second time. The pain of separation was so violent that Thérèse's body gave way. She became seriously ill, suffering from uncontrollable tremors, fevers, and terrifying hallucinations. The family doctor diagnosed the condition as a severe neurotic attack caused by repressed emotional frustrations. The family, desperate and fearing for the youngest's life, prayed fervently, until on May 13, 1883, the miracle happened. The statue of Our Lady in her room seemed to come to life. The Virgin Mary smiled at Thérèse with indescribable sweetness. Immediately, all the pains, tremors, and hallucinations disappeared. Thérèse was cured. Have you ever felt that your emotional or physical problems were too great to overcome? Thérèse discovered that healing often comes from where we least expect it, through a simple look of love from heaven. Curiously, Thérèse herself doubted her miracle shortly after. When questioned by the Carmelite nuns about the details of the vision, she felt cornered and began to think she had invented everything, that she had lied. This doubt tormented her for years, showing how human and fragile she still was. It was only after the complete conversion on Christmas Eve 1886 that Thérèse regained the strength of soul she had lost with her mother's death. From that moment on, she felt an irresistible call. She wanted to enter Carmel and dedicate her life entirely to God and the salvation of souls. And the first soul she decided to save was that of a brutal murderer. In the summer of 1887, France was shocked by the case of Henri Pranzini, an adventurer condemned to death for brutally murdering 3 women in Paris, including a child. Pranzini showed no remorse and refused any religious assistance. Thérèse, only 14, adopted Pranzini as her first spiritual child. She prayed fervently, offered sacrifices, and asked God for a sign that he would be saved, even at the last second. On the day of the execution, Pranzini ascended the guillotine scaffold. He had not confessed. But suddenly, moved by a sudden inspiration, he turned, grasped the crucifix the priest extended to him, and kissed the wounds of Christ 3 times before the blade fell. When Thérèse read the news in the newspapers, she cried with joy. She was certain that her prayers had been heard. This event confirmed her vocation. She would be a Carmelite to pray for sinners and priests. But there was a great obstacle to her entry into the convent. She was only 15 years old. The local church authorities repeatedly denied her request. The Bishop of Bayeux was categorical in saying that she was too young to endure the austerities of Carmel. Thérèse, however, possessed an iron determination beneath her fragile appearance. During a pilgrimage to Rome with her father and sister Celine in November 1887, she did something unthinkable for the time. At the general audience with Pope Leo XIII, pilgrims had been strictly forbidden to speak with the pontiff. But Thérèse, breaking all protocol, knelt at the Pope's feet, grasped his knees and pleaded, "Holy Father, in honor of your Jubilee, let me enter Carmel at 15. The Pope, surprised by the girl's audacity, responded kindly, but without yielding, "Well, my daughter, do what the superiors decide. You will enter if it is God's will." The Swiss guard had to carry her out of the enclosure, as she refused to let go of the Pope's knees. Despite the apparent defeat in Rome, Thérèse's determination impressed the authorities. A few months later, the bishop finally relented. On April 9, 1888, at just 15 years old, she crossed the heavy wooden doors of the Carmel of Lisieux. But life in the convent would not be the romantic refuge many imagine. Carmel was a place of extreme austerity. The nuns woke up at 5 in the morning in winter, slept only 6 hours a night, and prayed the divine office 5 times a day. The cold in Normandy was biting, and the convent had no heating. Thérèse, who was always sensitive to cold, suffered in silence. The food was simple and often unpalatable. Furthermore, she faced the incomprehension of some older nuns, who found her young, inexperienced, and spoiled. There was one nun in particular who deeply irritated Thérèse. During silent prayer in the chapel, this sister had a habit of tapping her rosary on the wooden bench, making a constant and maddening noise. What would you do in Thérèse's place? Complain? Ask to move? Thérèse did something revolutionary. She decided to transform that annoying noise into music for God. She not only endured the nun in silence, but began to treat her with so much love and smiles that the sister even asked, "Sister Thérèse, what attracts you so much to me that you always smile when you see me?" This small episode reveals the core of the spirituality that would make Thérèse a doctor of the Church. She saw the great works of the saints of the past, martyrs who gave their lives, missionaries who crossed oceans, and felt small and incapable. "How can I prove my love for God if great deeds are beyond my reach?" she asked herself in her nightly prayers. If you are enjoying discovering the hidden details of the life of this great saint, subscribe now to the Sancti et Heroes channel. Your subscription helps us continue producing in-depth documentaries about the heroes of our faith. It was in reading the Holy Scriptures that Thérèse found the answer that would change modern theology. She understood that she did not need to do great things to be a saint. She created what she called the little way. Holiness for her did not consist of extreme flagellations or mystical ecstasies, but in doing the small things of everyday life with extraordinary love, folding a mantle forgotten by another nun, enduring an injustice in silence, smiling when exhausted. Everything was offered to God as a little flower. "My way is all confidence and love," she wrote. Thérèse saw herself as a small child who, unable to climb the steep stairs of perfection, asked Jesus to take her in his arms like an elevator to heaven. This radical simplicity was exactly what the modern world, tired of rigidity and perfectionism, needed to hear. But Thérèse's faith would be tested to the absolute limit. Few know that Thérèse had an ardent missionary desire. She wanted to go to the Carmel of Hanoi in Vietnam and even asked permission for it. As she could not go, she became a spiritual sister to two missionary priests, one in Africa and one in China, exchanging profound letters that guided them spiritually. But Thérèse's final sacrifice would begin on the night of Holy Thursday, 1896. At 23, she coughed up blood for the first time. It was the terrible sign of tuberculosis, an incurable and devastating disease at the time. Along with the atrocious physical pain, which attacked not only her lungs but her entire body, came an overwhelming spiritual darkness. Thérèse entered what mystics call the dark night of faith. During the last 18 months of her life, she felt as if heaven was closed and God had abandoned her. The voice of darkness whispered in her mind, "You are dreaming of light. Rejoice in death, which will give you not what you expect, but an even deeper night, the night of nothingness." It is shocking to think that the saint of confidence and love spent her last days fighting the temptation of atheism. She wrote beautiful poems about the joy of paradise, while inwardly she doubted its existence. "When I write about the happiness of heaven, I feel no joy," she confessed to her superior. "I am simply speaking about what I am determined to believe." Can you imagine the heroic strength needed to smile, console her sisters, and write words of hope while facing physical death and absolute inner darkness? By obedience to her prioress, Thérèse began to write her memoirs in school notebooks during this agony. This manuscript, written with the last strength of a dying young woman, would become one of the most widely read books in the world, Story of a Soul. On September 30th, 1897, Thérèse woke up for the last time with her eyes fixed on the statue of Our Lady. That morning, still in darkness, she whispered, "Oh, with what fervor I prayed to her, and yet it was pure agony without a ray of consolation. The air of the earth fails me, when shall I breathe the air of heaven?" The dark night was still there, but Thérèse did not retreat. At 2:30 in the afternoon, she sat up in bed with a strength that surprised the sisters and declared, "The chalice is full to overflowing. I could never have believed it possible to suffer so much. I do not regret having surrendered myself to love." Near 7 in the evening, she asked the prioress, "Mother, is this not the agony? Am I not going to die?" The prioress replied that yes, it was the agony, but that Jesus perhaps wanted to prolong it for a few more hours. Thérèse replied serenely, "Very well then, very well. I do not wish to suffer less." Her last words, looking fixedly at the crucifix, were, "Oh, I love him! My God, I love you!" She was only 24 years old. And then something happened that the sisters present would never forget. After appearing to have died, Thérèse suddenly rose, as if called by a mysterious voice. She opened her eyes, which shone with indescribable happiness and peace, and fixed her gaze above the statue of Our Lady, the same one that had smiled at her in childhood. She remained like this for a few moments. Then her soul was taken. The dark night had ended. Not with a gradual sensation of consolation, but with a single definitive gaze from God. Before dying, Thérèse had made a bold promise. "I will spend my heaven doing good on earth. I will let fall a shower of roses." And she fulfilled her promise spectacularly. Soon after her death, The publication of Story of a Soul caused an unprecedented explosion of worldwide devotion. Miracles began to be reported on all continents. Soldiers in the trenches of World War I carried her photo. The famous singer Edith Piaf was cured of blindness in childhood after praying at her tomb. In 1923, the Church officially recognized two inexplicable miracles for her beatification. One of them was the cure of Charles Ann, a young seminarian given up for dead from tuberculosis, the same disease that killed Thérèse. His destroyed lungs were completely restored overnight. Only 27 years after her death, on May 17, 1925, Pope Pius XI declared her a saint. St. Peter's Basilica was illuminated by thousands of torches, and a crowd of 60,000 people celebrated the little flower. Devotion to Saint Thérèse grew so overwhelmingly that Pope Pius XI made a surprising decision in 1927. He declared that young nun, who had never left her convent in Normandy, as the principal patroness of missions. She was placed on an equal footing with the great St. Francis Xavier, who had traveled to the Far East to preach the gospel. The Church recognized that Therese's silent prayer and hidden sacrifice had a spiritual power as great as the most heroic missionary journeys. Later, in 1944, Pope Pius XII proclaimed her co-patroness of France, alongside her childhood heroine, Saint Joan of Arc. And in 1997, on the centenary of her death, Pope John Paul II granted her the title of Doctor of the Church. She was the youngest person and only the third woman in history to receive this honor, recognizing the revolutionary theological depth of her little way. The story you have just heard shows us that true heroism often hides in simplicity and in pain endured in silence. If the life of Saint Thérèse has touched your heart, leave your like and share this video with someone who needs hope. And be sure to watch our episode about Saint Martin, the mother who died too soon